Time to bring in my special guest tonight, live in the studio with me, former Foreign Minister, former High Commissioner to London, former Liberal Party leader, my former boss and continued good friend, Alexander. Welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure, Chris.
Look, there's lots to talk to you about, especially Brexit and the election looming in the UK in December. I want to get your thoughts on Donald Trump and global issues as well. But I have to kick off by asking you about this extraordinary story, this tale of George Papadopoulos and you having a drink with him in London 3 years ago, and how this has actually become almost the genesis of that whole Trump-Russiagate scenario and investigation. Was there any sense at that time that there was anything sinister or historic unfolding?
Look, there is now in the United States yet another inquiry into this, and Scott Morrison has said the Australian government will fully cooperate with that inquiry, so that's what the government's doing, and so the plan is to say nothing during the course of that inquiry, let it take its course, and it'll eventually...
Well, you don't want to say anything about it, but do you remember the occasion as a friendly drink? Was there anything spectacular that you recall about it?
I mean, it's the same answer. I mean,
all right.
I've talked about it before, but now that there's an inquiry, I think it's best we just let that take its course.
Just two other points on this. One is then, have you been interviewed by the FBI on this yet?
So the answer is always going to be the same, no matter what question, because the reason for that is that I don't think we want anything we might say, you know, publicly in other parts of the world, in this case in Australia, to play into the inquiry. We want to let the inquiry take its course, and
but you would have no objection.
I mean, we've said that we will fully cooperate. I mean, the Prime Minister said that Australia will fully cooperate with the inquiry, so I'm fully cooperating. It won't come as a surprise with the Australian government, and so, you know, as DFAT said through the Senate Estimates Committee, and I just repeat what they said, the best thing to do is let the inquiry take its course, and you know, it'll produce its results, and then I'm sure people can say whatever they like after that.
So as a retired politician and a retired diplomat, you still have to be diplomatic about this. You're doing what is going to be best for Australia and Australia's national interest. But
well, whether I'm retired or not, I play for one team, and that team is Australia.
Well, there's one other question I want to ask you about this. I just put a tweet up on screen here from George Papadopoulos. I think I'm imagining already what sort of a reaction we're going to get from it. But he's been very extroverted, if you like, a loudmouth on Twitter. He said here about he's been right about you from the beginning. This is an old tweet, but this is when he really put you in the frame, I suppose, called you a wannabe spy and some sort of Clinton errand boy. It's been one of those interesting issues where a lot of people on the left of politics have scoffed at this stuff and saying it's laughable, suggesting that you were some sort of Clinton errand boy. But the question I was going to ask is just your thoughts about Papadopoulos. Is his problem here, the reason he's going so feral, as we would say, because he feels so much guilt? He seems to have been the person whose loose lips have created all this pain for the Trump administration.
Well, I think the inquiry will get to these sorts of matters, Chris.
Well, I've got to have a go. I've got to have a go.
I mean, you read it. I mean, I look at Twitter and I put things on Twitter every so often, and honestly, the stuff I read on Twitter, it's unbelievable. No wonder people have become less engaged with Twitter as time has gone on. There really is the most... I mean, it is so full of personal abuse, ad hominem attacks. I would say to people, if they're thinking of going on Twitter, try to think of an argument for your cause rather than just 10 different ways of abusing people you disagree with.
Do you think it's helped make politics more toxic, that social media dimension?
It's hard to judge that. I'm not sure that it has particularly. I think the biggest risk of social media when it comes to politics is that politicians themselves focus on the social media. So they might do an interview like we're doing now, and at the end of the interview go off and see what people are saying on social media, and then worry if there's a lot of criticism, which means that when they're actually doing the interview, they're looking at minimising criticism and maximising approbation, Whereas I think it might be better if they concentrated on the core issues and didn't worry too much about what was in social media.
Yeah, it's going to give them a bad steer.
It's a distraction for the political class if they allow it to be a distraction. And I think, you know, they'd do much better just to concentrate on the core issues the public are concerned about rather than worry about activists on social media.
I think you're absolutely right on that, and I've talked about this a lot in the past, but there's one glaring exception, or there's a glaring exception that proves another side of this, and that is Donald Trump. The way he has used Twitter and social media generally to sort of bypass the mainstream media, to go through what he would call the Washington swamp, over their heads, directly to people. It's been amazing to see him do that.
Yes, I mean, I personally think that some of the language he uses is completely inappropriate for a head of government, particularly the most powerful government in the whole world. But I think really, he shouldn't be constantly partisan, even if his political opponents are constantly partisan. But nevertheless, of course, for somebody like President Trump, he has a point, because the US media, it isn't all, if you like, centre-left and sympathetic to the Democrats, but it is overwhelmingly sympathetic to the Democrats. And the average working journalist in the United States would be a Democratic Party supporter. So the Republicans generally have a point, that they don't have much support in the media, and Donald Trump uses terms like fake news. Any criticism of Donald Trump, any misstep, is beaten up. Sometimes, of course, it's right to criticise him. Sometimes it's just a complete beat-up. And so it's hard. And I do think conservatives in Western countries have a slightly harder time looking at it as an outsider now, having retired from politics long ago. They have a harder time in the media than the left of centre, not the far left, but the left of centre.